Welcome back to Leadership in Teams. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be taking a look at current era leadership. Current era leadership. And there are three different topics, three different schools, three different types of current era that your textbook's going to take a look at. It's going to take a look at transactional and transformational leaders. It's going to take a look at value-based leadership, including in that servant leadership, authentic leadership, and positive leadership. And then the third and the final major school that's going to look at, or type of leader it's going to look at, is charismatic leadership. Now, if you recall, we've already covered transactional and transformational leadership when we went over change. What I would recommend is certainly you want to read your book with regard to this. You want to take a look at the PowerPoints, take a look at my notes, but you also want to go back and take a look at your notes for transactional and transformational leadership from change. Given that, then, what we're going to do is we'll focus on value-based leadership and charismatic leadership. So let's start off and let's go into value-based leadership. Now, with regard to value-based leadership, I have four topics I'm going to go over. We're going to take a look at the introduction. Then we're going to look at each of the three different types of value-based leadership mentioned in the book. So let's start off with the introduction. The introduction says that value-based leadership looks at leadership as being spiritual, highly emotional, and based on values such as caring, integrity, and service to others. It says that value-based leadership looks at leadership as being spiritual, highly emotional, and based on values such as caring, integrity, and service to others. Let's go to the second subpoint under this introduction. Some examples include, and these are the three that we're going to be taking a look at, some examples of value-based leadership include servant leadership, authentic leadership, and positive leadership. So what we're going to do is go look at each of those in turn. So our second major topic is going to be servant leadership. Now, with regard to servant leadership, I have two major points I'm going to raise. The second one has several subpoints. The first major point I want to raise is service leadership. In service leadership, the focus is on followers. A servant leader will focus on his or her followers. The servant leader is not going to focus on the organization, not going to focus on the leader himself or herself. It's going to focus on the followers. Second subpoint that I have under servant leadership, second and final one, some key characteristics. You probably want to take a look at figure 6.3. I'm not going to put it into the slides here or into the video clips here because it's going to say what I'm about to read, but still I would take a look at it. With regard to key characteristics, the textbook lists, it looks like 8 of them with regard to servant leaders. Again, the first of these, the focus is on followers. The servant leader looks at himself or herself as being first among equals. Everybody's here is equal. I'm no better than you. I'm no worse. We're all the same. There's certainly no ego here with regard to it. The third characteristic is the servant leader is empowering. He or she is always trying to empower the followers, so to speak, empower the team, etc. with regard to it, the teammates. Lots of empowerment is used. Another characteristic of a servant leader, he or she is usually pretty empathetic. He or she feels your pain, feels the pain of the other players, of the other members of the work group that you have. The next of these leadership characteristics, key characteristics, is this person is accountable. If this person screws up, this person tells you, I'm sorry, it's my fault, it's on me. Doesn't blame you, doesn't blame, fate, takes responsibility for it. The sixth of the characteristics with regard to a servant leader, he or she is authentic and not fake, doesn't have a facade, this is what I want you to think of me. This person is pretty much open and very authentic and certainly not faking what he or she is or how he or she feels about something. The seventh of the characteristics, servant leader tends to be humble. And again, no big ego here. We're not being arrogant. We're not claiming all the accolades here. This is a team project, etc. It's not me, it's all of us. This person tends to be humble. And finally, the eighth and final characteristic is this, a servant leader tends to be motivated by service. Motivated by service. I want to do something for you. I want to do something for the group. I want to do something for the business, the team, the community. I want to serve. I want to help out. So this person is motivated by service. So those are 8 of the key characteristics of a servant leader, and as you look through them, none of them really seem that bad, do they? Seem like this is a pretty good person. Whether or not that makes a good leader, I guess, depends on whether or not it fits the situation. But certainly looks like a type of leader that many of us would want to have. So let's now go to the second type of value-based leadership, and it'll be the third major topic for our lecture, and this is called authentic leadership. Authentic leadership. Okay, now let's move on to authentic leadership. Authentic leadership. Once again, I have 2 major points to take a look at, and each of these has some subpoints for you. Someone who is an authentic leader, the first thing we want to do is we want to take a look at some components of that person. If you're an authentic leader, these are probably some components that you have. If you know someone who's an authentic leader, these are some components that he or she has. The first of these is self-awareness. If you're an authentic leader, you're aware of yourself. You have a good idea of who you are, where you stand, and how you fit and everything. The second of the components, this person tends to be unbiased. We don't have insiders and outsiders. We're not discriminatory or anything. Unbiased, and usually this type of person uses what's called balance processing. Balance processing. You're doing things, trying to keep things in balance as you process things. Again, no favoritism one way or the other with regard to this. You're just doing things to try to keep things in balance. The next component, this type of person is true to himself or to herself. You're true to yourself. You're authentic. Notice the name, authentic leadership. You're true to yourself, and you're motivated by your personal convictions. I really believe in this, and that's what's going to drive me to do well in this job and to lead here. You're motivated by your personal convictions. And the last of the components involves something called, you engage in what's called relational authenticity or transparency. There's an interesting buzz phrase for you. Relational authenticity or transparency. Basically, what all those fancy words mean when you put them together is you let others know the real inner you. You let others know the real inner you. You're authentic. You're not covering anything. You're not changing anything. You let others know the real inner you. So that's the first point under authentic leadership, some components. Let's go to the second. The second point under authentic leadership are just some comments, some general comments about authentic leaders. If you're an authentic leader, might be some comments about you. Let's assume that you are. If you are an authentic leader, you need to be yourself. Again, going back to your authentic, you need to be yourself. You're not a phony. You're not a fake. The second thing, you do what you say, and you match your actions to your words. You do what you say, and you match your actions to your words. Look how many times we have leaders that say one thing and do another. Here, this is not what's going to happen with an authentic leader. An authentic leader is going to do what he or she says. The next, you're going to be true to your heart and values. If you're an authentic leader, you're true to your heart and values. Again, you're not fake. If you have this inner conviction that your heart has a passion to do this, your values decide that you have to do that, you're going to follow your heart. You're going to follow your values. Let's go to the fourth of these, and I think we have about 8 of them. The fourth of these general comments, you have a strong sense of values and purpose. Strong sense. You're not lost. You don't know, I don't know if it's up or down or inside or out. You have a strong sense of values and purpose. You have an idea what your values are, a strong sense of them. And you have a pretty good, strong sense of your purpose. This is what I want to do. I'm not just out there not knowing today what I'm going to do. I have a strong sense of purpose. I know where I'm going. I know what I want to accomplish. The next of the general comments, you have a moral and ethical compass. If you're an authentic leader, you have a moral and ethical compass, and you follow it. And again, that goes back to being authentic, right? You're not going to say, okay, my ethics tell me to turn left, but I'm going to go right today. You're not going to do that because you're authentic. You have a good moral and ethical compass, and you're going to follow it. You're going to be moral. You're going to be ethical. You're going to stay with your convictions that we said earlier. The next of these, number 6, the 6th comment. You're going to build on your strengths. You're going to build on your strengths rather than address your weaknesses. An interesting way that the book phrases this. You're going to build on your strengths rather than address your weaknesses. I don't think that means that an authentic leader overlooks his or her weaknesses. I think rather it's, I'm going to focus on my strengths, I'm going to build on my strengths. Not necessarily I'm going to overlook, I'm going to continue to carry these weaknesses around that I have, but rather I'm going to look at it from a positive side as opposed to a negative side. Let's go to the 7th of these general comments. You're going to develop general relationships. with the members of your team, with the people that you deal with, customers, suppliers, whatever. You're going to develop genuine relationships. People can count on you. You are authentic. And finally, the eighth comment here is you don't look at yourself as a product of your success. Again, no ego here. You don't look at yourself as a product of your success. Rather, you look at yourself as a product of your challenges. Not a product of your success, rather a product of your challenges. Now, think how that changes your outlook. If you look at yourself, hey, I'm successful because, well, I'm successful. That probably gives you a completely different way of looking at things. And hey, I tell you what, the reason I'm here is I had all these challenges in life, and things never came easy, and I had to work for them. And you know what? I worked hard. I overcame most of those challenges, if not all of those challenges. So, and I know more challenges are coming up. I'm not someone who's born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I'm not better than anybody else. I know that I have to work hard, and I know that I can. And that's what we're talking about here. Now, one of the things I might suggest to you is in your textbook, it actually, amongst the cases and references and examples in your textbook, it talks about the head of Starbucks and some of the challenges that he went through, and how those challenges formed his character. You might want to take a look at that. That's what we're talking about here. So that wraps up what we're talking about with regard to authentic leadership. So now let's go to the next type of leadership that we want to look at here. And we're going to look at positive leadership. Positive leadership. Okay, let's go to the third example of value-based leadership, and this is positive leadership. Positive leadership, we just finished authentic leadership, now we're going to positive. Positive leadership, and under positive leadership, I have, I believe, 3 major points to raise, not just the normal 2 that I've had for the last couple. The first major point are some characteristics of positive leaders, some characteristics of them. Once again, you want to take a look in your book at figure 6-5. I put it in here into the video, but it's going to have everything I'm about to say here, so I'm not going to stick it in, but you still should take a look at it. With regard to characteristics of positive leadership or positive leaders, let's take a look at them. The textbook has, it looks like we have 10 of them. The first, perseverance. Perseverance. A positive leader, we're going to overcome, we're going to prevail, we're not going to stop, we're going to keep going. Perseverance. Efficacy. Efficacy. Third, there's a focus on strengths. We're not going to focus on weaknesses. We're not going to focus on all the horrible things of life. We're going to focus on our strengths. We'll see what we can do with regard to our strengths. Optimism. Absolutely. Someone who's a positive leader certainly is going to have optimism. Resilience. You're going to get knocked off your horse a couple of times. Things aren't going to be easy, but you're going to always, after you get knocked off your horse, you're going to stand up, dust yourself off, and get right back on the horse. You're going to be resilient. You're not going to let someone stop you. You're going to keep on going no matter what setbacks you have. The next of these, I guess, is number 6. You're integrated. You're integrated. You're able to pull all sorts of things together. You're not just, you're thinking about one thing at a time or whatever. You're able to see the whole field. You're able to integrate parts of whatever you're doing, parts of yourself, etc., parts of your team. You're integrated. The next is dynamic. You're a dynamic person. Not only, are you're not boring. You got people moving around and doing things, etc. You're dynamic, and you actually create a dynamic amongst those who are on your team. You've been on teams where there are good dynamics and bad dynamics. Well, someone who's a positive leader usually is going to create a good dynamic on the team. The next, you have what's called an affirmative bias. An affirmative bias. When you look at things, generally, if you look at a glass and it's half full or half empty, you talk about being half full. You don't spend much time, if at all, looking at, well, it's half empty. You look at the positive side of it, so you have this bias, and it's an affirmative bias. You're looking for the shiny part of the cloud, and clouds are dark, but there's always some sort of shiny part to a cloud. You're looking for that. Let's go to the next of the characteristics that we have positive leaders. You engage in intentional positive behaviors. You not only do you do so just out of the fact you're just a positive person anyway, that's also something you try to do. You try to intentionally engage in positive behaviors. So many people in the world, are negative. And here you're intentionally engaging in these behaviors, intentionally trying to inspire people or whatever, maybe get them thinking about the positive. And the last of the characteristics is pretty true too. If you're looking at life and really do believe life to be that positive, you're probably going to have some confidence too. You're probably going to believe, yeah, we can do this, we can overcome with regard to it. So that's the first major topic under positive leadership characteristics. Let's go to the second major topic that we have. And the second major topic are just some general comments about positive leaders or positive leadership. And here it looks like we have nine general comments. The first general comment is someone who is a positive leader will focus on the positive. Focus on the positive. Take a look in your textbook. There's something called positive psychology, and they usually engage in this. So they focus on the positive, this positive psychology that they have. Second comment, someone who is a positive leader usually emphasizes strengths and capabilities and possibilities. Emphasizes strengths and capabilities and possibilities. I mean, think about this. How many times when you were younger did you come in the door with a report card? And your report card, or it was emailed to your parents or whatever, but the report card, it had a couple of really good grades and a couple that were okay and maybe one that was bad. When you came through the door, someone who's a positive is going to be looking at the good grades. Oh, that's great. Look at that. Wonderful. And even with regard to bads, they're going to be talking to you in a positive way. Yes, we can overcome, etc. with regard to that. So they emphasize strengths and capabilities and possibilities. Let's go to the third comment. Someone who's a positive leader will help people to achieve their highest potential, or at least want to help and try to help people to achieve their highest potential. So, for example, if you're a positive leader, say on that baseball team, you're a coach of a bunch of young kids or whatever on the team. You're trying to help each one of those kids to achieve the highest potential, to become the best catcher, the best second baseman or whatever that you have. So what you're doing again is you're trying to really help them. You're looking to achieve your highest potential, and you're looking to help them achieve theirs as well. Let's go to the fourth of the general comments. You flourish when you get other people to be positive too. When all of a sudden you're positive, and the next thing you find it's catchy, and some others are positive too. You flourish. You love that. That makes you feel good. That inspires you to be even more positive going forward. The next, and this is related to it, you inspire yourself and others. You're an inspiration to yourself because you're positive, but others you're hugely inspirational to, because they look at you and you're looking at things and we can do it. You know what? I know it's tough, etc. And look at all these things, but there's that silver lining, the words I couldn't get earlier. The silver lining to that cloud. We're going to find something. We're going to get this done. So you help to inspire others, and particularly when you're focusing on their strengths, capabilities, and possibilities, that also is very inspirational. The next, you bring out the best in everyone. A positive leader, you'll bring out the best in everyone. Yes, we all have bad things, but let's look at the positive. Look at the great things that you do. Think about this. When you sit down and you're having one of those horrible arguments, with your significant other, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, and you're looking at all the negatives. But then flip it the next day when everything's okay and you're back together again, and you just think this other person's the best in the world. What are you doing now? You're focusing on the positive. Well, that's what we're talking about here. You're trying to bring out the best in everyone. Next general comment. You're encouraging. You believe in the positive things are going to work, etc., and you encourage others to keep trying. You're going to do it. Yes, you're going to do it. You're very encouraging. Next, and related to that, use positive communications. Positive communications. There is a really good video that we show in some of my other classes. Unfortunately, I can't bring it into this one. And it's called ZAPP and SAPP. ZAPP and SAPP. And it basically is talking about there's two ways to say things to people. One way to say it will energize them, will zap them like a lightning bolt coming down. And the other way will sap them, will de-energize them, will make them feel bad or whatever. Well, you use positive communications. You're zapping people with your communications. You're finding ways to say things, even bad things, that can be looked upon as a good way of saying it. For example, somebody is trying to accomplish a task and they just don't have the confidence. Instead of saying, You don't have the confidence. What's wrong with you? You're going to say, listen, I've seen you do this before. I know you can do it, etc. So you're going to use that positive communication. And then the final, the general comments, and you can see it's related to everything I've said so far. Here, you're enthusiastic. Well, why not? You look at the world in a positive way, so you're enthusiastic. You see problems as opportunities. You see, tomorrow is bringing all sorts of opportunities to do good things and to achieve or whatever. You're very enthusiastic, and enthusiasm, just like being positive, is catching. Well, let's go to the third and final major topic under this positive leadership, some potential cons. I mean, all these things sound great, but there are some potential cons with them. And your textbook mentions 3 of them. And I think the 3 are good. There are probably some more you can come up with, but let's take a look at the first one. The first one, someone who's a positive leader can engage in what's called delusional optimism and leadership. Delusional optimism and leadership. There are times, let's face it, things are not going to work out. And yet you're still telling everybody, oh my goodness, everything's wonderful, we're going to create, all sorts of things. And they're looking at you like, you're crazy. So you're delusional. So you can have delusional optimism and leadership. I'm not saying you shouldn't be positive, but I think there has to be a little bit of realism brought into this, right? At least a little bit of realism brought into it. The second potential con, you can be called what they call a Prozac leader. A Prozac leader. Prozac is a drug that they give to people. I believe it has to do with depression and anxiety, etc. And it kind of makes everybody, feel good, but they really oftentimes living in lives that still are not all that good. Well, you're a Prozac leader. You're giving everybody pills to make them feel good, but you know what? The situation still isn't that good. So that's a problem. That could be a problem because you want to fix the situation. You don't want to just make everybody happy. You want to fix the situation. And lastly, the potential con is your relentless optimism. Your relentless optimism can lead to overconfidence on your part. Overconfidence on your part. And I want to come back and make a comment about that. And it can also take away your credibility. People begin not to pay attention to your optimism. They decide not to believe in your optimism because, well, he's always positive. She's always positive. It doesn't matter. Your arm could be falling off, and they've got some good things to say about it. Don't pay attention to that person. So you got to be careful about the credibility aspect. Let's go back to this thing about being overconfident. There's a movie that I hope to be able to show in this class, or at least give you a link to see, called Pirates of the Silicon Valley, and I mentioned it earlier in one of our other lectures. And this movie is about how Steve Jobs started Apple and how Bill Gates started Microsoft, and it's a really pretty good movie. In that movie, there's a scene, though, that relates to this, and we see Bill Gates and one of the top people in Microsoft, a guy named Steve Ballmer, are outside a building, and they're waiting for one of their other colleagues to come with hopefully good news, but maybe bad news, with regard to a huge opportunity they had in the business. And Ballmer looks at Gates and he says, "What are you worried?" And Gates's response to that goes to this bit about being overconfident. He said, "Worried? Yes, I'm worried." He said, "Success is a menace. It makes smart people think they can do no wrong. Success is a menace. It makes smart people think they can do no wrong." So be careful about that. As you gain success and you become optimistic, you might all of a sudden become overconfident. Now, people can jump up and down and say, where do you draw the line? What's overconfident, confident, underconfident, etc.? And I'm not going to get into that. I'm not so sure where the line is either. But once you get into the point of being overconfident, now all of a sudden people start to question again, are you the type of leader that I want? I want someone who's confident, but I also want someone who's somewhat realistic too. So you got to kind of be careful there. So that finishes up this concept of positive leadership. Now what I want to do is I want to go to the last major topic that we're going to look at under this unit, and that's charismatic leadership. Charismatic leadership. Okay, let's stay in this current era leadership, and let's now move to charismatic leadership. And with regard to charismatic leadership, I have, let's see, looks like 3, 4, 5 major points to raise. So let's get started with charismatic leadership. And the first major point are some requirements and characteristics. Some requirements and characteristics. to have charismatic leadership and of charismatic leadership, some requirements and characteristics. Let's start off with follower characteristics, followers of people who are charismatic or who seek out leaders who are charismatic. Followers tend to have the following characteristics. Textbook lists 6 of them. First, they have an intense emotional bond to that leader, to the charismatic leader. Oh my gosh, you're sweeping me off my feet. I've never heard anything so great. This is exactly what we need. I'm all for you. An intense emotional bond. Second, there's a high degree of respect and affection and esteem for their leader. The followers of charismatic leader respect their leader. They love their leader. There's the affection and there's that esteem. And the esteem goes in a couple of different ways, but one of them is, well, this is my candidate. This is my person. This is my leader. And because your candidate, person, leader, or whatever's in charge, that kind of makes you feel a little bit better. I picked the right one. We're in charge or whatever. So again, the second one, high degree of those various aspects that we mentioned. Let's go to the third follower characteristic. A charismatic leader usually has followers who are loyal and devoted to that leader. Loyal and devoted. A charismatic leader usually has followers who identify with the leader. That's, that person, I look at that person as kind of being me. Look at how people, not looking at leadership, look at how people identify with, saying, be on a team, or rooting for the Yankees or the Dodgers or the Cubs or whatever it might be, and how they identify with it. Oh, I'm a Miami Marlins fan or whatever it might be, and that's what I'm saying here too. The followers identify with their leader. Their leader is me. I'm part of that leadership, etc. Let's go to the fifth characteristic of followers. They have high performance expectations for their leader. If you're a charismatic leader and you've got me believing that you're the best thing that's ever come along, I have high performance expectations. I have high expectations. You're going to do a good job. You're going to get done with a lot of things I need and want to have done. And finally, the final requirement of follower characteristics is they usually have unquestioning obedience. Unquestioning obedience. Again, let's go back to certainly a charismatic leader, but a negative charismatic leader certainly was Adolf Hitler. Look at the unquestioning obedience that he got from so many people, in the Third Reich in Germany, in the Nazi Party. They did some things that they never would have done. But because he said it and they had unquestioning obedience, there we go. So that's the first major point under requirements and characteristics, follower characteristics. Let's go to the second major point under requirements and characteristics, situations where charismatic leaders tend to be found. Situations where charismatic leaders tend to be found. And the textbook mentions 5. The first, when there's a perceived need for change. We've got to change. We can't do this anymore. Okay, let's go back to Nazi Germany after World War I through the Weimar Republic or whatever. Inflation that costs $1 million to buy a loaf of bread. Everybody's out of work. You have riots in the streets between the communists and the loyalists and everybody else, the socialists, etc. out there. There is a perceived need for change. We got to fix this. We can't continue on this way. Second, when there is a sense of imminent or perceived crisis. A sense of imminent or perceived crisis. Again, I go back and I hate to use Hitler as an example of anything other than bad. He is bad, but he's also charismatic. He's charismatic bad. So take a look at the imminent or perceived crisis that they had there. It's imminent. It was perceived. It was both. It was there. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And things are only going to get worse. Let's go to the third situation when charismatic leaders tend to be found. When the leader has an opportunity to articulate his or her ideological goals. When the leader has an opportunity to articulate his or her ideological goals. Let's go to a really great charismatic leader. Let's go to Martin Luther King. One of the things that really helped to build Martin Luther King's followers and helped to establish him as such a charismatic leader in the movement to stop this racial discrimination that was going on in our country, was he had opportunities to speak all over the country. He got to the point he was speaking at huge and immense crowds, say in Washington D.C. and other places like that, allowing him to tell everybody what his ideas are, to articulate them, and so many people listened to them and said, wow, that makes sense. I really like that. And if you have an opportunity to do that, you have more people coming on board, as he did. As he found more and more followers through his movement. Let's go to the fourth situation when charismatic leaders uh, uh, tend to be found when there are available dramatic symbols. When there are available dramatic symbols. Now, I want you to think about this. Let's again go back to, sadly, I'm not going back to the bad guy. Let's go back to Adolf Hitler. What was the dramatic symbol he had? How about that swastika? And he had, the red flag with a white circle and the black swastika on there. Dramatic symbols. You'll find that oftentimes when there's a charismatic leader, there is a dramatic symbol that either he or her group came up with. You find some sort of dramatic symbol. So let's now go to the fifth situation when charismatic leaders tend to be found, and that's when there's an opportunity for that leader to articulate the roles of his or her followers, an opportunity to articulate the roles of his or her followers. Once you think about it, people want to be engaged. They want to be, if they're going to be a part of something, they want to be engaged. They want to do something, they want to accomplish something, they want to be part of the movement or whatever. So indeed, if you're a charismatic leader, one of the things you want to do is you want to tell people how they can be engaged. How can they be a part of it? What can they do? What are their roles going to be? So that's the fifth situation. You have an opportunity to tell them this is what you're going to do. This is what your roles are going to be. Let's go now to the sixth of the situations when you tend to find charismatic leaders. When there's a power vacuum. When there's a power vacuum, nobody knows who's in charge. Somebody's got to step in. And indeed, that's kind of what we saw, again, going back to, again, a horrible example, going back to Adolf Hitler. There was a power vacuum back then. The Weimar Republic certainly wasn't very strong or very powerful, and you had all these different groups growing up in different areas. And, you had militias this and militias that, and you had this gang against that gang, and there was a power vacuum. They needed somebody to step up who was going to be a strong leader. And unfortunately, that was Adolf Hitler. So there was a power vacuum. Let's go to the seventh situation where you'll find charismatic leaders, when it fits the organizational structure. When it fits the organizational structure. Some organizations are so rigid, and the people that are picked up, through the organization and come up, they're picked, from the, based on non-emotional aspects, etc. You're not going to find too many charismatic, if any charismatic leader in an organization like that. Whereas other organizations, it's kind of wide open, it's kind of loosey-goosey, and it's very easy for a charismatic leader to step in. So when it fits the organizational structure. The next, we only have two more of these situations where we find charismatic leaders. Next is when it fits the culture. When it fits the culture. There are a lot of cultures that have what you would consider to be a strong man or strong woman type of leadership culture. They look for these prophets, and I'm not necessarily saying a religious prophet, but someone who has this vision or whatever, and that's the person who's going to get as much power as we possibly can give him or her. So there's certainly cultures where that fits. And then the final situation where you tend to find charismatic leaders is when it fits the tasks that need to be done. You have some horrible things that need to be done. You need so many people involved. You need oftentimes to have someone who's a charismatic leader to sweep people away, not necessarily think of the rationale of what's going on or how hard things are going to be, and get them so emotionally wrapped up in this that they're going to go ahead and do it. So sometimes you have tasks that just fit very well for a charismatic leader. So that finishes up the third major topic under requirements and characteristics. We looked at follower characteristics and situations when charismatic leaders tend to be found. Let's go to the third and the final subpoint under that, and that's characteristics of charismatic leaders. Some characteristics of charismatic leaders. And the textbook lists 6 of these. Let's take a look at it. Charismatic leaders tend to have high self-confidence. Indeed, don't they? John Kennedy was considered to be a charismatic leader. Look how much confidence that he had. Again, Martin Luther King example. And then I guess, again, to go to Hitler, the bad example. All of them certainly had high self-confidence. The second characteristic of a charismatic leader, strong convictions about ideas. Strong convictions about ideas. Look at how the strong convictions that Martin Luther King had towards equality and civil rights, etc. That certainly is a great characteristic, of him, and it certainly fits one of the characteristics of charismatic leaders. The next, high energy and enthusiasm. High energy and enthusiasm. Look at speeches of John Kennedy and the energy he had, the speeches of Martin Luther King, or even the speeches of Adolf Hitler. Look at the high energy and enthusiasm that they had. Next, the fourth of these characteristics, they tend to be expressive. I remember as a child watching John Kennedy, one of the things that was pretty cool is he talked with his hands. Well, I mean, he certainly talked verbally, but he was always moving his hands and doing this, that, and the other. And if you watch, again, Adolf Hitler, he did all these different things, all these horrible things, but he did those as well. And you got to Martin Luther King. Look how expressive he was when he was delivering things. He didn't, stop and stand perfectly straight. He was very expressive. The tones of his voice changed, and he took you along with it. Let's go to the next characteristic, and it's related to that. They tend to be excellent communicators. Excellent communicators. They know the right way to say things to people. Might be the wrong thing to say, like Adolf Hitler. All the things he had to say were wrong, but he had the right way to say it. He knew what his audience wanted to hear and how they wanted to hear it, and he was able to express it that way. And then also, of course, look at, again, Martin Luther King and John Kennedy. Weren't they excellent communicators? I mean, they were wonderful with regard to what they did. And then finally, let's take a look at the last characteristic of charismatic leaders. They're active image builders. Active image builders. Think about the images that they created. John Kennedy, don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And we're going to go to the moon and all these other things. Look at the image that they built. Martin Luther King, and listen to the speeches. His speeches, he talked in pictures. You could listen to his speech and could see the picture of what he was talking about. You had a vision. You shared his vision with regard to it. They were active image builders. Well done on that with regard to it. Well, let's go to, that finishes up the first major topic under charismatic leadership, the first major topic, and that was requirements and characteristics. Let's go to the second major topic under charismatic leadership, and that's culture and charisma. Culture and charisma. And your textbook has three things to say there. They say that charismatic leaders tend to be more common in cultures with prophetic traditions and saviors. Cultures with prophetic traditions and saviors. And if you think about, you'll see that. For example, let's go back to Adolf Hitler. And if you take a look at the history of Germany, there were, prophetic leaders that came along. I think it was Frederick the Great, and just, saved the country, saved Germankind, etc., like that. So you'll find charismatic leaders in places where you have these prophets and these saviors. Then the second aspect under culture and charisma, and that is, the textbook points out, you should recognize that what's viewed as charisma in one country may not be viewed as charisma in another. Charisma is culturally based. You may find somebody who really excites the crowd, say, again, let's go back to Hitler in Germany. The people in Germany were going absolutely nuts in the 1920s and 30s, cheering, etc. And over here in the United States, we're looking at videos of them, the movies that were taken. Why? He's crazy. Why do they people, he's a nut. Why is anybody listening to him? So what's viewed as charisma in one place is not necessarily viewed as charisma someplace else. And then the last point here with regard to charisma charisma can be positive, negative, or both. Positive charisma, we have, again, Martin Luther King and John Kennedy. Negative charisma, you've got Adolf Hitler. You could have someone who's got a little bit of both. They take you in a good direction and a bad direction as well. So you have to be careful. Some charismatic leaders are great. Some charismatic leaders are absolutely horrible. So charisma is kind of dangerous. It can be really good. It can be really bad. Let's go to the third major topic under charisma. And again, the second major one was culture and charisma. Let's go to the third one, ethical or socialized charisma. Ethical or socialized charisma. Someone who engages in ethical charisma or socialized charisma, they focus on organizational goals. They have a message built around the common good. They encourage and seek divergent views. They have open and two-way communication. It's just not me talking to you. I'm listening to what you have to say to me. They will accept criticism. I might be charismatic, but doesn't mean I'm perfect. They'll accept criticism. They will use impression management to energize and motivate their followers in a positive way, in a positive direction. And finally, with regard to ethical or socialized charisma, they uh, will actually describe an actual need for the change. They're not making this up just so that they can get into office. They're not taking a molehill and turning it into a mountain. They actually see a real need for change. They're not lying to people with regard to it. Let's now go to the fourth major topic under charisma, unethical or personal charisma. Unethical or personal charisma. This someone who has this type of charisma, they focus on their own personal goals, They really don't care about the goals of the commonwealth, the common good. Although I will say this, many people who are charismatic have huge egos. They're immensely egotistical. And, and Adolf Hitler is a good example of that. And oftentimes what they will do is they will say, well, if I want something, that means everybody else wants something. If I like something, that means everybody else likes something. So while their goals are indeed their own goals, they project them, wrongly project them, on other people. Oh, everybody must want this, right? Because I want it, everybody must. So again, they focus on personal goals, but sometimes they joke themselves, they kid themselves, and they project their goals onto others and then say, oh, no, I'm not doing my goal, I'm doing everybody's goal. No, that's not right. Let's go to the second point under unethical or personal charisma. Here, they build a message. This type of charismatic leader will build a message that's usually about them. Again, let's go back to Adolf Hitler, certainly an unethical charismatic leader. Look at the book that he wrote that really helped to spread his name. It was called Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf, which in German means, or that's German, in English it means my struggle. He's talking about himself. He's not talking about everybody else, he's talking about himself. So they build a message that centers on their goals, on their self, so to speak, on themselves. Let's go to the third point under unethical or personal charisma. They censor others, they discourage others, and they punish others for having divergent views. They censor, discourage, and punish divergent views. No. If I say it, that's the way it is. Everybody must like it. And if anybody doesn't like it, if they have a divergent view, there's something wrong with them. So we have to snuff them out with regard to it. Fourth point under unethical or personal charisma, they usually engage in one-way communication. It's usually just top down, from them to everybody else. Go back to Hitler, and he's standing in Nuremberg, and he's got a million people in the stadium. He's not asking them to talk to him. He's talking to them. He's telling them. It's one-way communication. Let's go to the next of the characteristics of unethical or personal charisma. We just have three more. They're closed to criticism. And oftentimes they punish dissent. Go into Nazi Germany and say, if somehow you could get on a time machine, go into Nazi Germany, go back to 1935 or something like that, and say something bad against Hitler. Go back to 1941, say something bad against Hitler. What's going to happen? Punish dissent. You're probably going to go missing. You might go to a concentration camp. You might be shot. Whatever it might be. They certainly are closed to criticism. The next of these unethical or personal charismatic criteria, they use impression management to deceive their followers. The other one, we're recognizing what's going on and telling the truth. Here we're using it to deceive the followers. Again, let's go to Hitler. He was blaming all of the world's ills. Everything that was wrong was blamed on a certain religious group, and that was ridiculous. They had nothing to do with it. Everybody, if you looked at the situation Germany was in, everybody could recognize there were so many different reasons for it. But he used impression management to deceive his followers. And finally, let's go to the eighth and the final point under unethical personal charisma. These people, these unethical charismatic leaders, they create or they exaggerate the sense of crisis. They create or exaggerate the sense of crisis. Oh, if you don't join the Nazi Party, the Red Communist horde from wherever is going to take over the country and whatever. They create or they exaggerate the crisis. So, oh my gosh, I got to follow him, because otherwise, look what's going to happen tomorrow. Remember one of the things I mentioned in an earlier class, somebody was talking about sales techniques. Said you want to appeal to people's fears and passions. Well, here, if you're exaggerating the sense of crisis, aren't you appealing to their fear and maybe even creating a passion for them, for a leader like this, because you're going to save me? Doesn't that go back to the savior aspect that we're talking about? Well, let's go to the fifth and the final major topic under under charismatic leadership. And these are some practical implications of charismatic leaders. Some practical implications of charismatic leaders in leadership. Textbook mentions three. The first, a charismatic leader certainly can be very powerful and very impactful. Not necessarily good, but very powerful and very impactful. Take a look at how much power, for example, that Martin Luther King had. He was in charge of no army, right? He was not, a president or a governor or whatever, but look at the power he has. So they can be very powerful, and look how impactful he was. The second, this charismatic leadership is oftentimes based on the leader's personality. The leader's personality. Whether or not the charismatic leader then focuses on himself or herself is something else. You have a good leader or a bad leader there. But most of these charismatic leaders, the charisma they have is based on their personality. You could take someone who's charismatic, and you probably have met them, who's not a leader, who's not a, John Kennedy, is not a Martin Luther King or an Adolf Hitler or whatever, just a normal person, and you're at a, golf outing with them, you're at some party or whatever. You can see the person who's charismatic. And what's the charisma based on? Usually they have this personality, this magnetic, electric type of personality that attracts others, it draws attention, it charges, electrifies, zaps others. And the final practical implication of charismatic leadership is it basically connects the leader by energizing his or her followers. Connects the leader by energizing his or her followers. There are very few people who would listen to, say, John Kennedy or Martin Luther King or an Adolf Hitler in those own cultures that weren't energized. Now, sometimes they're energized in a negative way. There are some people who really hated Adolf Hitler, but nonetheless, you usually find that charismatic leaders tend to energize their followers, hopefully energize them in a good way, but sometimes in a bad way too. Well, that finishes up what we're talking about with regard to current era leadership. And again, if you think about it, so many of those points that we talked about, transactional and transformational, servant leadership, authentic leadership, positive leadership, all under that value-based leadership, or charismatic leadership, all of those tend to be things that you can look around today, or at least in recent history, and you can see leaders who have some of those things, right? I'm not so sure you find everybody that, a leader has everyone, but you can find that have some. So as you start to develop your leadership capabilities, whether you're leading that, youth sports team, or you're leading, your office or department in a business, or whether you eventually decide to, jump in and become a governmental or political leader or whatever, with regard to leadership, these are some things you probably want to take a look at too. I'm not saying the stuff we talked about before wasn't important, it surely is, but these are some additional tools, some newer tools, so to speak, for your toolkit as you start to build your leadership skills and abilities. Well, as I say, that finishes up with current era leadership, and next on our list is we're going to be taking a look at some other leadership perspectives, Hope you enjoyed today's lecture, and I'll be talking with you soon. Goodbye, everybody.